All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to today's last presentation for the NNP Symposium. We are sponsored by EPNUS, the Eric P. Newman Numismatic Education Society, which I expect all of you are tired of hearing me say by now. There are a lot of familiar faces. But this presentation will be the last for today in the Iowa State Showcase Series. This is a program that Central States is starting this year, highlighting each of their different member states, one per year, starting with Iowa. So joining us this time, we have Dave Stark. He is a retired pharmacist and a collector of early copper, primarily middle date large cents. More relevant to today's talk, he is a longtime office holder in the Iowa Numismatic Association, which is what we'll be hearing about today. So that's it for me. I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and I'll be back at the end for the Q&A.
And thank you very much. Yeah, I'm going to say we have a long and storied history for the INA in connection with the Central States as well. So today I wanted to present, I think, my slide's not progressing.
Yeah. There we go. Should just be able to
Can I do that?
try hitting one of the arrows.
Good.
There we go.
We're good. Okay, start over again. Yeah, thank you for asking us to do this. We're proud to be the first of the showcases, and I had the privilege of attending and conducting a committee meeting several years ago at the INA to reorganize our holdings of scrapbooks and collectors and things like that. That got me interested in the history of the INA and went on from there. So I was the logical one to come and present our findings from that. The outline of what I wanted to talk about today are kind of broken up into 4 topics. One, I found out that you can't really do justice to the initiation of the INA unless you know about the history of coin collecting nationally in the 1930s. And so the first part, you get a history lesson about that, I think is extremely interesting. The next section is going to be the formation of the INA and its early years, which is, and maybe a few anecdotal stories along with that. And then the more current Iowa accomplishments and contributions that we've made to both Central States and numismatics in general. And then at the end, talk about our current services, which hopefully give some ideas to other states and organizations of what you might be able to give to your members and member clubs. To start with the history in the 30s, we have to start with the history of the 20s, as far as I'm concerned. So the history in the 20s were primarily held by a few major collectors and a few major dealers. So some of the ones that we all probably are familiar with, the dealers, the big ones at the time were like Max Mell, Henry Chapman Brothers, Elder Burnett Johnson. Collectors, Eliasberg started in the late 20s on amassing his amazing collection. Colonel Green has a history and a fantastic story in itself, and the Virgil Brand collection began in that. This was a time after the war that had some inflation, good times, a lot of money spending, but it all came to a crash, obviously, on Black Friday on October 29th of 29. The Depression lasted till into 34, and you'll see how that affected coin collecting at that time. During that first part of the 30s, huge money shortages. We did not need coinage at that time, so that's why we end up with low mintage of all the denominations in the early 30s. Particularly the 31S penny was within a year was touted as the rarest thing, since the SVDB. So it just was amazing at how expensive a 31S penny was in 32. Anyway, coin prices rose despite the recession and depression. But what it did was it stimulated the interest in the collection of collectors, and partly as looking at it as investing as well, since coin prices were rising. The other federal things that went about were like the Treasury would sell direct. You could write them a letter and say, I need 10 1929 S pennies, and they'd send them to you. They had backlogs of other coins, the denominations you could ask them for. So they were accommodating collectors at that time. And then, of course, the recall of gold at that time helped as well, I suppose. This is an interesting quote I found as an unknown complaining collector from the numismatist in 37. I first attended auction sales in 31 and got used to the low prices at which coins were selling then. Just compare the prices of ordinary half dollars in choice condition. A couple of years ago, they could be picked up at $1 or less. Today, they will bring $2 or better. And his complaint was, I surely am glad I bought my coins before 1937 because buying the same coins today would cause an awful emptiness of the bank account. So we always have complaints about prices, no matter what generation we might be in. This is the most important point I had on why I started with the 20s. The 20s were a few collectors, few dealers, all of this, the depression, money shortage, things like that, that stimulated collecting to the common man. Okay, that's what made the huge increase in collecting at the time. And to accommodate that, or because of cause and effect, I don't know, but the 31S touted as a low mintage. The new Washington quarter design at 32, the peace dollar resumed mintage in 34, all of these. And there was a huge, glut of commemoratives being produced every day, it seemed like in the mid 30s. So much so that collectors complained that there were too many. So we can probably complain now that there's too many coin designs, but it happened back then too. Proof coinage resumed in 36, again at the demand for the new collectors to do everything. And then at the end of the decade, the new Jefferson nickel. So there's a lot of stimulation in coin design going on at that time too. Okay. And to meet the demands of the new collectors coming in, there's a couple of things that had to happen that really took things off from their increased interest and demand. One was the lack of information at the time. About the only thing being published periodically at the time was the Star Rare Coin Encyclopedia. That was in the, I think, mid-20s type of thing started, and it was still going, but it was kind of slow, out of date type of thing. Finally, in 34, Waite Raymond came up with the standard catalog of US coins, and that seemed to be a real turning point. They say that that really was transforming the information to the common collector, because it had all the coins and it had approximate prices in it. So it's the first comprehensive book, on what the collector needed at the time. And also quickly after that, in 1935, Lee Hewitt started the Numismatic Scrapbook. And that was a monthly publication of various things, had advertisements in it. He just put together, as it was called, kind of a scrapbook, so of various things. We'll see later that Lee Hewitt was very instrumental in promoting the hobby, in beginning clubs, formations, and things like that. And the second thing, so the information was being produced that was needed. The next thing that we're all familiar with, I'm sure, are penny boards. And this changed collecting very much forever, is what is credited. So we all know that, but digging into it, I found it was even more important or instrumental than I had originally thought. Joseph Post devised the penny board, 11 by 14 board, with holes for dates and mint marks in it. He approached the Whitman Publishing Company at the time in order for them to simply produce his board. There's a young man by the name of Richard Yeoman at the time, who was the marketing director at Whitman. And as the quote he said later on was, Yeoman recalled that some of us looked over the samples and quickly got the urge to reach in our pocket and fill up those holes. So it turned out, and this what really struck me, it was more of a game. It was more of something to do. It was entertainment. And that's what really brought the common man to collecting. You had to fill up those holes. And then the Whitman Publishing Company ended up buying the rights to it, and they had the distribution method as well. And because they had outlets in all the Woolworth stores at that time. So they had a distribution marketing type of place. So I thought that was significant. To emphasize that even more on the Whitman coin boards, several years later, Ken Brissett was interviewed, and he talked about that too. He said, coin boards created a whole new generation of collectors. Thousands of people, myself included, got started in the hobby by using those Whitman boards and later the folders that they changed them to. The funny part is that when this began, the board was simply viewed as a leisure time activity. Much like Whitman, I didn't realize this, Whitman company also produced jigsaw puzzles and playing cards. So the board in filling up those holes from pocket change was more of an entertainment and a game. And that's why the everyday family in the recession got into it. And that just meant that much more on why it blossomed at that time. Like I say, Ken Brissett's the one on the right. The other young numismatist there is a guy that was just happy to meet him and have his picture taken with him. The other coin folder at the time actually preceded the blue board by a little bit, but in 1928, Martin Bissell manufactured the two-sided the board with plastic acetate layers on each side so you can see both sides. Waite Raymond bought the rights to that, manufactured them. He bought them for the sole purpose of thinking he could sell more coins if they were in holders and things. So this was obviously the more elite and more expensive kind of holders type of a thing. But again, now that we had some information, now that we had holders to put them in, it really took off. Exemplified by this, the ANA membership in 1930 was about 1,200. By the end of the decade, it was 3,200. So that was the blossoming, like I said, going to increasing that so much. Lee Hewitt, remember the numismatic scrapbook guy, was from Chicago. And Chicago at the time had a fantastic coin club. So a lot of people were very active in that coin club, and we'll see how that also promoted. But Lee Hewitt was instrumental in getting a lot of this put together. And this is with the increased growth. So from an Iowa standpoint, in 1936, the Des Moines Club was formed, which is the first club in Iowa. And in 37, quickly after that, 4 more clubs were formed. So you can see the growth very quickly in that. And in early 38, the Des Moines Coin Club sent out an invitation to all known collectors of Iowa and all the clubs to invite them to Iowa City to form a state club. And so they all got together June 19th of 38 for the purpose of forming a club, which they did. The INA was the first state numismatic organization made up of individual members in the country. It was formed June 1938 in Iowa City. Quite a few people from Chicago Club came over, including Henry Ripstra, which is the ANA president at the time, and said that we had more new collectors in Iowa that he knew of than any other state. Lee Hewitt, again, was promoting this at the same time. Maybe some of that was more self-serving, so he could sell more magazines if there were more collectors and things like that. In any event, it was extremely important in promoting all this. And several officers from Chicago came over to help form the INA. So there's always been a close connection there. The first meeting in 38 was said July 19th. The day after was the first publication of the newsletter that they wrote up that advice. The first newsletter was simply called the INA, the official publication of the Iowa Numismatic Association. A couple of years later, it turned its name into the INA Bulletin. And after it went about 15 more years from a newsletter type thing, now we call it the Iowa Collector, and it is in booklet form. So it progressed quite nicely. There was a second, they held 2 conferences a year. The second one for 38 was held in October in Des Moines, and they formalized a few more organizational things at that time. Didn't stop there. Club formation was important. They saw the importance of clubs, and the Chicago area had a conference in April of the next year in 39, and they formed Central States, which is the current 13-state organization. That conference was sponsored by 17 different clubs, 5 of which we probably say were from Iowa clubs. So we were instrumental in getting there. Both clubs were so successful, 38 the Iowa Club, 39 Central States, that they decided to have a joint convention the very next year. So in 1940, in Burlington, they had a standard, what I call a standard program. And it was interesting to see what programs were at that time. Number one draw were exhibits. So everything was exhibits and educational opportunities type of thing. They also ate and drank a lot. So they'd usually start off with receptions or breakfasts. Then they had business meetings and educational meetings. Then they'd eat some more, have usually an evening banquet, but they would also have an auction each day. And in between, they had exhibits the whole time. So day 2, they'd get up and eat a little bit more educational opportunities, and they'd have a second auction. We know that some buying and selling and trading were kind of going on the side type of thing. And it was suggested the year before this that they designate a small area for dealing called a bourse. And so what I could find was in 1939, the INA had its first designated bourse area. In 1940 was the first known designated bourse area. So prior to this, it was different. And I sometimes wonder how people would think back then of what we do now. It's all bourse, no exhibits, and things like that. So it has gone from a purely educational type of a format to what it is today, whether you like it or not, that type of thing. But it was interesting to me back then on when was the first bourse types of things. For all you ladies out there, don't shoot the messenger here. But back then it was a male, virtually a complete male hobby. I think out of the first 81 members of the INA, there was 1 woman type of thing. So anyway, in the INA bulletin after the convention of 1940, I thought it was interesting that Saturday afternoon's program is going to be a honey. The tour of the state penitentiary and the Schaefer Pen Company factory, returning for a 20-mile Mississippi boat ride to see the new locks and dams. So an exciting time was had by all, or at least the ladies, I should say. The convention in 1940 was considered and was a huge success. It was talked about as being the largest convention west of the Mississippi at that time. There was 175 registered guests, and many more came that weren't registered. There was 378 at the banquet. So it was well attended and did very well. All 13 states of Central States were represented, plus a couple of more. At the time, again, there were still a few dealers, and the collectors were more, but there's a few major dealers. And so all the big people were there. Ripstra, I said Lee Hewitt, some of the instrumental officers of the time, but also had the other folks. So you can see the advertisements I have up there from the agenda from that convention, having Stax in New Netherlands and the Kellys, and Hollenbeck Stamp and Coin was a department store division by Art Kagan. So we know Art Kagan from the Iowa group. It was a tremendous success, except for maybe a few. And I thought this very, very interesting. Eric Newman at the time was just a new lawyer out of St. Louis, very much interested in numismatics and research. He had a new bride, Evelyn, and his quote that I admired the most was, "Our first coin convention together, Evelyn and I went to Burlington, Iowa. They put us in a hotel, which was right next to the humping yards, which is the train switching yards, and very noisy. So all night it kept us awake." And later on, he went on to say, "I have not been to a coin convention in 15 years and would take considerable pressure to get me there." Now, in all, as I have here, in all fairness, it wasn't necessarily that we were bad hosts in Burlington, Iowa, but to me, a lot of it was that he was more research oriented, educational oriented, and he was seeing a bourse and seeing more toward commercial buying, selling, profit, things like that. And that was not necessarily for him. So I'll defend the Burlington Hotel a little bit because of that. For those of you who are not familiar with or have never read the book Truth Seeker, The Life of Eric Newman, highly recommended. Tremendous story. Should be on the bookshelf of all numismatists, and co-authored by our own Len Augsburger. So we'll give him a plug. And I know he had a great time interviewing Newman for this book.
I distinctly remember sitting at his dining room table and having him tell us this story.
Oh, okay.
Evelyn did not go to a lot of conventions after.
So anyway, it meant a lot to me when I read that from the book. So I had to include it in here. The success was so great that the dual clubs had another joint convention in 42. This was in Des Moines, and in anticipation of being such a large convention, they expanded it to 3 days. So it was basically the first 3-day convention I could really find at the books, including the ANA and stuff like that. So it was a big deal. And again, the big shots were there. But one of the other interesting side stories here was they were staying it was held at the same convention center hotel that the Hollywood Victory Caravan of movie stars were staying. And that was movie stars going around the country at that time promoting the purchase of war bonds. And so in the INA bulletin and things like that, some people were anxious to try to get a glimpse of a Cary Grant, a Charles Boyer, Bob Hope, Jimmy Cagney, Bing Crosby, or perhaps Claudette Colbert. I did not find any documentation that anybody actually got to see any glimpses of them. And we'll skip a few years. The war years, the ANA skipped, I think, 2 conventions. So their first convention after a hiatus was the 1946 ANA convention, and it was held in Davenport. For about 4 years previous to this, the governor of Iowa and the Iowa Numismatic Association were lobbying the ANA to have it in Iowa in honor of our centennial, to help us celebrate our 100th year of statehood. So they had that, they did honor that, had that. We had the Iowa commemorative $50. By 46, a lot of collectors had forgotten about the glut of commemoratives that overtook everybody in the 30s and were, bored of them. So they were both successful. The Booker T. Washington and the Iowa half were pretty successful in 46. And as you see that the ANA membership, doubled again since the late 30s. So tremendous growth post World War II. Had the new Roosevelt design changed, and the first Red Book was published. So again, increase in prices fueled all of what we did. Put a little pat on the back to the founders of the Iowa Numismatic Association. These are the original officers of that. And as I've indicated here, many of the INA office holders went on to be ANA officers of some kind. So Ted Hammer was the first INA president. He wanted to be a district secretary, chairman of the Coin Week, and later the librarian there for a while. Skip down to the bottom there. By 1948, INA members filled 8 of the 13 ANA posts. So we're very proud of having a rich beginning and contribute to the national scene, as well as I said, along with Central States, obviously. So that's our history lesson. So now we'll kind of get on to some of our things more recent things we're accomplished and are proud of. I'll talk a little bit about authors from Iowa who have written books. The Higgins Museum of National Banknotes, if you're not familiar with them. The INA website launched in 2003. We were one of the first ones to repeal the sales tax on bullion and collectible coins in 2006. And then working with the Newman Portal, the Iowa Archive digitization of our records in just a few years ago. I looked that up. I thought it was longer ago than that, but it was only in 22. These are some of the books that have been written by Iowa authors. I'll invite you, anybody present, to go down to our table. We have all the books down there you can look at if you wish. But some of the things that people might be more familiar with were Dean Oates and Hickman and Oates writing a standard catalog of national banknotes. That was quite revolutionary at the time. And most people are familiar with any or many of the Don Kagan books. I think he wrote 5, has written 5 books, overall. But there are others that have been hard copy published on Iowa tokens and things like that. The other one that I have never been too familiar with, because I'm not a currency collector, but we invite you to come to Iowa, located in wonderful Okoboji, Iowa, in northwest Iowa, to go to the Higgins Museum of Money. If you look at their website, they'll tell you a lot more about them, but their mission is for the acquisition, preservation, and display of notes of this era, the national banknote era. Also invite you, they have a couple of presentations here, so you can view that later on. They have a couple of tables downstairs that's got a lot of good display types of things. And again, I'll invite you to the higginsmuseum.org website, because it's very nice too. Len Eisberger contacted me several years ago and wondered if we would like to digitize some of our records, which we were at the time looking to do. They've been extremely helpful, and they scanned all the INA history scrapbooks, which contains newspaper articles and things like that. We also sent in all the Iowa collectors, our newsletters, since the 1938 first version, things like that. We do have a link on our website, the INA website, to get to that part of the portal very quickly. So we wish to thank Len and all of his staff. They've been tremendous. Our website is ina.anaclubs.org. Invite you to go to that. Dean Parr and his son created that back in '03, and they are still our webmasters as far as I know. That's got that's where we go to get the current information about coin collecting and dealing in Iowa. This is what you see when you go to that website. Many links to get to things. One of the most important things would be the couple of pages on all the clubs that are active in Iowa, who to contact, when they meet, things like that. And the second thing would be all the coin shows we have in Iowa and when they meet and contact people. So that's one of the more important things that people usually go to. We do have said link to a lot of other things, to anywhere from specialty clubs. So the ANA has a link, Central States, ANS, EAC, all the specialty collector clubs you can get to right from our website. One thing I will point out is if you go to the main page all the way to the right, it says clubs, and the first thing underneath that that says clubs is you click on that, and it's got a lot of listings. And the ones I have circled there are direct to the Newman portal to get right to our archives that are what we've been talking about, so we can share our history there. Present INA services. One of the main things, like every organization, is your publication. Ours is called the Iowa Collector. It comes out 3 times a year, is 40 to 50 pages long, and are very proud of that. We also offer scholarships to the summer seminar, things like that. We're trying to rejuvenate. In the old days, like I said, it was all exhibits. They kind of dropped off. About 4 or 5 years ago, I wanted to increase that. So we reintroduced displays at a couple of our shows. The Ames Coinorama, every year, we have display space. And then the INA annual convention, we have that. I really want to increase that awareness and participation, because it's to me a lost art and a really valuable one. The last thing which I want to give to some of the other clubs out there are services we give, like called coin show support. The things that we do to help make it easier for local shows to get put on things. Here's the Iowa Collector. It said started calling the INA, then it went to the INA Bulletin, and now it's a 50-page booklet publication called the Iowa Collector. When we sorted everything out, that's my dining room table with all of the past issues. And what was interesting about that is that every time it changed look, a color of a cover or something, that generally indicated a new editor. So anyway, you can tell when we had new editors and when we had consistency going as well. The display opportunities and educational efforts that we do have a speakers bureau that any coin show, coin club can call up members that have presentations and would be happy to come and give an educational talk. So we highly encourage that. At the INA annual convention, we have at least 2 discussions and talks from people that. So we have definite presentations there, as well as exhibits and displays. One of the things that I really want to increase is we've never had judging of displays and exhibits. So I really want to increase that. I think it'd be fun to have some judging of them to increase the activity there. And also we offer, I said, scholarships. The INA does sponsor everybody or anybody in to the ANA summer seminar and also the ANA online tuition knowledge things. So do that. The Ames Coin Club also has scholarships available for the ANA summer seminars. And lastly, we call it coin show support. We've been always trying to think of what can services the INA do to promote, number one, kids' hobbies, and to put on a more successful or easier coin show at all of our local clubs. And a couple of things that we do have done. One is show security. You can use our examples of our registration forms at the registration desk, which requires, photo ID. We ask for email addresses and some other information if they'll give it to us. So to promote knowing who's going in. The other portion of that is the the Des Moines Coin Club has purchased security cameras, and they will rent those out to anybody, and they'll make sure it's set up properly. So we have cameras around the bourse floor with the monitor at the registration desk, which again helps discourage theft and things like that. So we try to promote and help clubs promote the security aspect. One of the other things that I think is a very valuable thing is our email reminders. Over the last several years, the Ames Coinorama, the Des Moines Coin Club Annual Show, and the INA, the three major shows in Iowa, we have all collected email addresses of attendees. And we've got a data bank of all these folks. And so if you have another local club that wants to use this service, we ask for $50. And for that $50, we will send out multiple direct mail bursts, reminders of that coin show, of all the known past attendees of any coin show. And for that $50, they get that, but also we will give them a $100 prize to give away in a lottery for anybody who registers who gives us their email address. And that club has to give those addresses to us, and we increase our list from that. So it's a mutually beneficial thing. It is easy to set up, and I think just direct mail advertising to known collectors is a valuable thing. And then lastly, but certainly not least, is we really promote the kids' table. So we do have a program. Chris Sunchins of our club has done it for several years. We adopted it as a service. So we kind of wrote it up as far as what to have out, what to give the kids, where to get supplies, free or cheap or whatever, as magnifying glasses and red books and things like that to give away. And have a table at the front by the registration desk and run all the kids through, and they get a big bag of goodies. Sometimes we have scavenger hunts and other things like that, but we promote that. The INA, to promote that, both telling them how to run a good one, we will reimburse that club 50% of the expenses they incur, up to $500. So that has worked out very well to try, again, to incentivize all club shows to have a kids' table and to promote the hobby. And that brings us to a conclusion. We'd like to thank Central States for the opportunity. The two, I said, organizations have been interconnected. We did very strong organizations, have a great history. And I think we've both influenced the hobby greatly. I want to thank Len and his staff, as well as Mitch and their staff, for putting this on. The last thing I want to do is refer you to the Iowa article that appears in the latest Sentinel, and that tells you even more about the Iowa history. That gets into it in a little more detail and things like that. So, thank you very much.
All right, then we do have time to take some questions. Let me get this stopped. There we go. Okay. So if you're watching online, just click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and you can send questions in there. We don't have anything in online that came in during the presentation. So do we have any questions in the room?
Your set of journals complete, or were there any like early ones missing?
I believe the very first year of journals, it was monthly. And I think we're missing maybe 6 of the 12 that first year, but it quickly, the second year turned into quarterly, I think. So yeah, we are missing a handful, but it's pretty complete.
They may not exist at
At
this point.
It'd be hard to recreate some of that back in the 40s type of thing.
Okay, anyone else in the room? Yeah.
Early on, Dave, you said there was pretty good collaboration between Iowa, Central States, and also the ANA. Was the ANA always in Colorado Springs, or did the ANA, was they someplace else? Were they in Chicago? Where was the ANA?
I know they moved to Colorado Springs not too many years
Yeah.
ago. I don't recall.
Well,
where
I
they-
think prior to that, they literally operated out of like the secretary's briefcase.
Oh,
Oh. Oh, okay.
So I don't think they have physical presence.
Yeah,
uh,
I was
prior
just
to
curious.
Colorado Springs.
Okay, we still don't have anything from online. So do we have anything else here? Nope. All right, then I think that will wrap us up. Thank you so much
Good.
for taking the time to
Thank
present. Great to learn more about Iowa. So that is all for us today. We'll be back bright and early at 9 a.m. Central with Wayne Homran and speaking about JSG Boggs, who is a artist. So we hope to see you all back for that one. Otherwise, all of these presentations are being recorded. The recordings will be available online in 2 to 3 weeks. They'll be on the Newman Numismatic portal as well as YouTube. And if you would like to receive an email when those are up, you can sign up on the paper at the front of the room here if you're here in person, or if you're online, you can sign up on our website. We'll also announce that on the symposium socials as well. So I believe that's it for us. Hope you all will join us again tomorrow, and thank you so much.
Thank you.